Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
You ready?
I was waiting for you. So what do we have today?
Today we'll be in a state known as the Show Me State.
Vegas.
This state is also known for their random oversized objects like a 12-foot pecan, a 42-foot tall rocking chair,
Minnesota.
a 34-foot tall rooster, the world's largest chess piece. It's 53 times bigger than a regular sized chess piece.
Iowa.
This state also has more bordering states than any other state, with a whopping 8 states.
Ohio. Oh.
The first successful parachute jump from an airplane,
North Carolina. Oh, wait, no.
occurred in this state on March 1st, 1912 by
Nebraska.
U.S. Army officer Captain Albert Berry.
Damn it, Andrew. You want me to go through all of them? Should have started from the top. Man, I'm bummed because I know this one because it was one of mine.
Today will be in Missouri in the 2000s.
That was close. I said one with an M.
I don't think that counts.
You don't know.
I do
We
know.
made this game up. I could get partial credit.
I don't think we made up trivia. I'm just saying.
You don't know.
I do know that.
Fine.
Anyway, so in the 2000s, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this case has several twists and turns that'll leave you asking, what the heck? So let me know if I confuse you on anything.
All of your cases make me do that.
Like, you have room to talk.
I do.
You just roped all our cases into one last week.
Yeah, most of them were yours.
Anyway, I'm going to start with telling you about 2 friends that were also co-workers. First up is Pamela Marie Hupp. She was born Pamela Marie Newman on October 10th, 1985. Her mother was a school teacher and her father worked for the electrical union. She was the third of 4 children. She was raised in a devout Catholic family. I don't know if you can hear that.
I can.
I got some parrots in this room right now, and they're feeling the need to shake the bars on their cage.
It's a new fan. Were they trying to make a great escape? One of them has a shovel.
So anyway, Pamela, she was the third of 4 children, and she was raised in a devout Catholic family. Nothing significant occurred in Pamela's youth other than her bringing shame to her family by being a cliche boy crazy teen who got pregnant by her boyfriend on prom night.
Ew.
A few months later, a very heavily pregnant Pam and her boyfriend were married. A few short months later, Pam gave birth to her daughter. That marriage would last 6 years, and during this time, Pam began working in the life insurance industry. On 2 separate occasions, Pam was fired for forging signatures.
Oh.
I'm not going to get into all that because this case is already very long, but just know she
is a dishonest person.
Yeah. And after Pam divorced her first feller, she had the next one already lined up. And then she meets and marries Mark Hupp, which is how she gets the name Pamela Hupp.
That's how that works. So I hear.
Yep. So he was a minor league baseball player for the Texas Rangers, and when he didn't get drafted, he fell back on his skills as a carpenter. Soon after marrying, Pam and Mark have a son together. And then the 4 moved to Naples, Florida for close to a decade before returning to Missouri. Pamela and her hubby Mark were living in O'Fallon, Missouri in 2001. That's when Pam began working as an administrator for State Farm. And she also had a house flipping business that she ran with her husband on the side. While working for State Farm, Pam met the second woman we'll be discussing, and her name is Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria. She went by Betsy, so we're going to call her Betsy for the rest of this case.
Because that's her name.
Yes. Betsy was 11 years younger than Pam, but the 2 hit it off. Betsy was married to a man named Russell Scott Faria.
She's 11 years younger. I thought we were in the 2000s.
So our murder happens in the 2000s, and this does happen in the 2000s.
Well, how old are they when they meet?
In their 30s and 40s.
But if it were in 2000, you do the math on that. And then when you say 11 years younger, I was like, what?
Interesting.
What?
I don't have to have her birth date wrong.
She was born in 2001?
No, there's no way she was born in 85. Hang on.
Sorry.
No, I'd rather you point it out. We've got fans that'll point it out for me.
Turns out we got a fan of fact checkers. 11 months apart.
So, Pamela Marie Newman was not born October 10th, 1985. I guess I went dyslexic temporarily.
Born in 58.
She was born in 1958.
Well, you... Yeah. That mugshot would have given her away for sure, because I'd have been like, she is not born in 85.
No.
She went from a sister to a mother. I'm just saying is all.
Okay, anyway. So Betsy was 11 years younger than Pam, meaning Pam was 43 and Betsy was about 32.
I don't know that I believe you.
Pam's in her 40s, Betsy's in her 30s.
Or they're 3 and 4.
Anyway, Betsy was married to a man named Russell Scott Faria. He went by Russ. Before working at State Farm, Betsy worked at a gas station, and that's where she met Russ in 1998. And by 2000, the couple were married.
How did they meet? She's working at a gas station and the other one's in insurance?
So, no, I'm talking about her husband.
I know, but I thought you said these two meet, but if the one girl is working in insurance and the other one's working at a gas station, how did they meet and become...
Okay, so I told you Pam's background, and when her and her husband moved back to Missouri, she began working at State Farm in 2001, right? Now I'm telling you about the other lady that she meets there, but before she started working at State Farm, she met her husband, where she was originally working at a gas station. The two hit it off, they started dating, and quickly got married, and that was in 1998. But by 2000, Betsy began working at State Farm, which is when she meets Pam in 2001. Okay?
Are you just letting me know this, or is it important?
Where they were working, not so much, but these 4 people are all pretty valid. So you need to know Pam, Betsy, and Russ, and kind of Mark. Mark, you don't really have to remember. That's Pam's husband.
I assumed by process of elimination, because I don't know that I heard his name.
After going back to school for a bit, Russ began working an IT job with Enterprise Holdings, and he also liked to wear his signature fedora and playing role-play games with his pals, like Dungeons and Dragons, and hanging out with his mom, fishing, and riding his motorcycle. He was also a stepfather to Betsy's 2 young daughters. Betsy had 2 young daughters from a previous relationship, and the girls only knew Russ as their dad. Betsy and Russ had a relationship filled with happy times as well as difficult times, and during part of the difficult times, the couple actually separated and then would eventually reconcile. Betsy was the life of the party. She had a side gig as well. She liked to DJ. She loved having fun and laughing, and Betsy and Pam became the best of friends. They did lose contact with each other for a bit, and somewhere in 2010, Pam stopped working in the insurance industry after she had an accident. She done shit her pants. No, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, I didn't know that was cause for time off, but you know what? If I shit my pants at work, I'd have some time off too, and I'd never be back.
I couldn't find any documentation on it, but apparently she was injured and she started getting disability benefits for back, leg, and neck pain.
Maybe a car accident.
There was no documentation on a car accident. And since she's a dishonest lady, I'm willing to bet she just didn't want to work anymore.
It was her sciatica.
There is a movie, not a movie, but like a mini series they did with Renee Zellweger. They mock Pam's injuries by saying she got hit in the head with a filing cabinet. but there's no documentation on how she actually got injured.
How did it affect her legs?
Like it smashed her. It fell on her head.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's not true. Everything I found says that it's an undocumented injury. So I don't know what happened to her, but she stopped working at State Farm.
That would be a wildly awful office accident.
It would be.
And I definitely would take some time off. And I would have like PTSD from filing.
She does start getting her disability benefits. And around the same time, Pam finds out that Betsy was diagnosed with breast cancer around the same time. And by fall of 2011, Betsy and her doctors were hopeful that Betsy had beat her cancer after undergoing a mastectomy. And she planned a cruise for November of 2011 to have a celebration of life. and she invited all her family and her friends. You know the expression, don't count your chickens before they hatch?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, despite all possible treatments, a month before her cruise in October, Betsy learned her breast cancer metastasized to her liver, and she was now considered terminal.
I would still go on that cruise.
Betsy decided heck with it, and she still went on the cruise. And her husband, Russ, arranged for Betsy to fulfill one of her life dreams to swim with the dolphins. Pam was not included on the cruise. Once Betsy returned from her cruise, Pam and Betsy were together every single day. Even though Betsy was dying, when Pam came to Betsy with a story about a woman named Laura Murphy who was also dying from cancer, Betsy was thrilled to be able to help Pam collect money for Laura and her family. Betsy was excited to be able to help another family that was struggling with the devastation caused by cancer. I think it gave her hope that people would show the same level of kindness to her family after she passed. They go on and raise some money for this family. And Betsy was going to her chemo appointments and would occasionally stay with her mom at her apartment. And then her husband, Russ, would either come pick her up or she would just stay there to kind of recuperate. Everybody just sort of pulled together to help Betsy, especially Pam. And about 2 months after learning she was terminal, on December 23rd, 2011, Pam and Betsy went to the local library to have the beneficiary of one of Betsy's 2 life insurance policies changed. One policy, her husband would receive $100,000, and the second policy was for $150,000, and she wanted that for her girls, but it was being left to Russ, and she was afraid that he was going to, quote, piss the money away. She also didn't want her daughters to receive it while they were minors, which I don't even know, can a minor receive a life insurance check?
Mm-hmm.
But the girls were young, and she didn't want them to blow it, so Pam agreed to become the beneficiary to Betsy's policy.
Oh.
And she promised that she would set up a trust to take care of the girls once the girls hit a certain age. They go to the librarian witnesses the change of beneficiary. But Betsy did not want Russ to know that she did this. In her mind, why fight about it, you know?
Yeah.
Which is also kind of fucked up that you're going to wait till you're dead to let them find out you did that. That's kind of... But I also get the why fight about it. What's done is done.
But I don't know if I would pick a friend that's on again, off again.
I don't know how long they lost contact for, but everything I read said they did briefly lose contact with each other.
Yeah, but she faked signatures at work.
Right. 4 days later, on December 27th, Betsy underwent another chemo treatment, then went back to her mother's house to rest. Betsy was going to stay the night with her mother, and if she wanted, Russ was going to pick her up after his weekly Tuesday game night with his buddies. His pal lived 5 minutes from Betsy's mom's apartment. Plus, her teenage daughters were also staying the night at Betsy's mom's. Realistically, it would just come down to whatever Betsy felt up to doing. But Pam found out she wanted to help, so she insisted on driving Betsy home so she could have the comfort of her own bed. Betsy texted her husband Russ after her chemo and said Pam was driving her home so she could lay down. And she's also added to that text that she needed to rest because her white blood cell count was low. And Russ verified by asking, "She's bringing you?" And Betsy replied, "Yes." She offered, I accepted. On the way home, Pam and Betsy left Mark, Pam's husband, a voicemail of Betsy thanking Mark for loaning Pam to her for a bit, and Betsy wishing him a belated Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And she sounded like her normal self, cheery and happy. Around 7 that evening, Pam drops Betsy off and returns to her own home. Pam lived in O'Fallon, Missouri, and Betsy lived in Troy, Missouri. The 2 locations are roughly 35 miles apart. Depending on traffic and speed, it was roughly a 45-minute drive. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Russ, Betsy's husband, leaves his Rollmaster pals around 9 p.m., and his tumbly was a bit rumbly, so he decided to go to Arby's and get him a snack. He ate, and then he headed home. Upon arriving home, close to around 9:40, he sees his dogs locked outside, and that was unusual because not only is it late, but it's also cold out. So he and his dog go inside. He clicks on the light. Nothing abnormal. He goes into the living room. He sees Betsy slumped over on the living room floor on her right side. Russ walks around the couch and sees his 42-year-old wife in a massive pool of blood with huge gashes on her arm and a knife sticking out of the side of her neck.
Oh.
In a state of both shock and panic, Russ grabs the phone and makes the following 911 call.
What is the address where you need us to come? One, one, 130 C-Mac. My wife killed herself. She's on the floor.
Russell, how long were you gone today?
I left around 5. I just got back. But she was at her mom's, and her friend was bringing her home, so I don't know what time she got home.
I don't know if you could understand him.
Sure couldn't.
He said that his wife committed suicide,
Oh.
and the police take one look at her, and they knew this was a murder.
Yeah.
I'll get into her wounds later.
I thought there was a knife in her neck.
There's several cuts in her arms, a massive pool of blood.
Well, I could see the cuts in the arms be an attempt.
Then she's got knife wounds to her neck. The day after finding his wife's bloody body, Russ was arrested for Betsy's murder. The first responders said it was ludicrous that Russ was saying her wounds were self-inflicted. During the investigation into Betsy's murder, police talked to her bestie, Pam, and Pam provides the officers with all kinds of useful information. After all, Pam had known Betsy for nearly as long as Betsy and Russ were married. Pam tells the officers Russ was a heavy drinker and he had a volatile temper. Russ had apparently threatened Betsy, according to Pam. She blabbed about how they had an on-again, off-again relationship, but Russ didn't try to hide that they had problems in their marriage and had split up a couple times. After the last time they had reconciled, they were together and had a solid 5 years of really having a strong relationship. He didn't hide any of that from the police. Then Pam was like, so I have a question. And the officer's like, yeah. And she's like, so did Russ find out that Betsy took his name off the larger life insurance policy and that she was going to leave him the next day? Is that why he killed her? Ding, ding, ding. We now have a monetary motive. Pam also told the officers about a letter that they should go look for on Betsy's computer. That should probably have some useful information on it.
This sounds like a setup and not even a very good one.
And the officers do, in fact, discover a letter typed on Betsy's laptop. In this letter, Betsy expresses her fear of Russ and that he said he wanted to kill her.
Was it saved after she died?
Sure was. The day after Betsy's funeral, Russ was officially charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. He was unable to post the $250,000 bond, so he was going to sit in prison until his trial, which wouldn't begin for nearly 2 years. While he's sitting in jail, the lead detective kept harassing Pam, did you open the trust for Betsy's girls yet? It's just days away from testifying against Russ. We need this policy to not be the issue.
2 years?
Yeah. And Pam was like, ugh. She's trying to move on with her life. And she did just use the life insurance money to buy another house. And she gave some money to her son, close to $123,000. So money is a little tight right now.
That's not what it was for.
So she tells the officer she commingled those funds with her funds.
That's not their fault. That's not what that money was for.
And she'll get it figured out. But through all the stress, Pam went to go visit her disabled mother. Shirley had dementia and arthritis. Pam spent October 30th, 2013 with her mother and then dropped her back off at her Lakeview Independent Senior Care Living facility. She dropped her off around 5 p.m. As she's leaving, she told the staff not to expect her mother for dinner that evening. And you know what? She probably won't be down for breakfast either. She's real sleepy. For me, when I used to work with elderly people, especially with dementia, the don't expect them for dinner, sure, we'd still check on them. But the don't expect them for breakfast either.
Because she's dead.
I don't know how that didn't raise an eyebrow, because we wouldn't have left somebody for over 12 hours and not checked on them. The following day, around 2:30 in the afternoon, a housekeeper found Shirley, Pam's mom, face up dead on the ground. She'd fallen from her third-story apartment balcony, landing flat on her back. The aluminum railing was broken on Shirley's balcony. The medical examiner ruled Shirley's cause of death blunt force trauma to her chest after an accidental fall. After Shirley's fall was ruled accidental, Pam and her 3 siblings collected $500,000 in investments and life insurance. At this point, Pam has cash flow again, and she reluctantly opens the trust for Betsy's girls just days before she's due to testify against Russ.
Mighty convenient.
Russ's trial begins a few days later on November 18th, 2013. I don't want to lose you in all the court details, so I'm going to give you like chunky bits of the back and forth. Pam was the prosecution's star witness, as well as the 911 call Russ had made. The prosecutors and police felt that the 911 call was an act and that the brutal injuries to Betsy were quite obviously not self-inflicted. Her body was covered by a towel, also indicating remorse. Betsy was stabbed more than 55 times, which also indicated a crime of passion. The gashes that ran down her arms were so deep, the bones were exposed. One of her many other stab wounds went through her eyeball.
No.
Yeah. And then she also had many defensive wounds on her forearms and hands. She was stabbed in her neck and torso and back repeatedly. That's why when the paramedics and everybody arrived, they're like, how is he saying that this was self-inflicted? This is not self-inflicted.
He's not a detective.
Yeah. Well, Russ's defense pointed out that he had an alibi. 4, actually. Russ was with 4 of his friends until 9 p.m.
Well, that, and I would imagine in order to do all that stabbing, there'd be blood on you somewhere.
Well, we'll get there. When he left his 4 buddies, he went to Arby's. Then he went home. And his cell phone triangulated his exact location, matching what all 5 of these men were saying. But the state was like, no.
It's always the husband.
They had an excuse or story to explain away his entire defense, no matter what they said. The prosecutor told the jury the 4 friends were in on the murder, and that the friends held on to Russ's cell phone to make it look like he was with them.
Did they also impersonate him and go to Arby's? Because I imagine there's security cameras there.
And the defense pointed out that the Arby's receipt, that shows that he was there too. And the prosecutor said it was probably one of his buddies pretending to be Russ to assist with the alibi.
Did he also use his debit card, or did it just pretend to be his friend?
Well, the prosecutor was like, they're into role play, and this was the role of a lifetime.
That was actually pretty good.
And then the prosecutor's claiming that they went and met up with Russ to give him his cell phone back. The defense pointed out that there was not one drop of blood found on Russ, and the prosecution said he done must have stabbed Betsy naked.
Oh.
And then, okay, let's say he killed her while he was naked.
Does that happen frequently there?
I don't know. They did find blood on Russ's house slippers.
Yeah, but...
And they were put away in the closet, and the blood on the slippers was dipped and then smeared.
Oh, so he didn't walk in it. Somebody was thinking real... They were trying to set him up from the start. Pam.
Then when the defense is like, yeah, okay, so let's say he did stab her naked. Where's the blood? Like, where did he clean up at? Let's see the evidence photos. And the prosecutor was like, nah. And the lead detective also did the uhs. And then they're like, the camera malfunctioned. And you're just going to have to take a set of word that I saw the Luminoff show that there was blood, but we don't have any proof.
What?
Yeah. So the defense was also prohibited by the judge from being able to tell the jury that Pamela was the last person to see Betsy alive, or that Pam's version of events had changed at least 3 separate times, or that she claimed she dropped Betsy off at 7 and then texted at 7:21 saying home, even though her cell phone showed that she was still at Betsy's house. The defense was also prohibited from mentioning that while yes, Betsy removed Russ from the beneficiary of one of her life insurances, but Pam was the other beneficiary, and she used the money as a loan for her son and her business, and it wasn't until the police forced her hand days before for her to open up a trust for Betsy's girls. They weren't allowed to say any of that. But long story short, the judge went to high school with the prosecutor. The judge refused to recuse herself from the trial. The prosecutor and the lead detective were having an affair.
Oh, the prosecutor and the detective?
Yeah. And they were all convinced that Russ murdered Betsy, and they needed to make sure that it looked like Russ murdered Betsy. And now the jurors believed the judge and the prosecutor that Russ had did it, and he was found guilty and sentenced to life plus 30 for the brutal slaying of his wife Betsy. Russ's attorney, he was livid at the misconduct of the judge, the police, and the prosecutor, and as soon as Russ was convicted, he swore to continue to fight for Russ to prove that he was innocent. He was telling the media about the injustices Russ was faced with, and it caught the eye of a Dateline producer and a news reporter named Chris. They're both important. Somewhere in the mix of ruling Pam's mother Shirley's death an accident and Shirley's kids cashing out, the medical examiner did an autopsy and found that Shirley had over 8 times the normal dose of the sedative Ambien in her blood.
8 times? Oh,
Yeah.
That makes sense why she wouldn't be up in the morning.
Sure did. And she had hidden bruising on the front top of her head underneath her scalp. So fresh boo-boos on her forehead.
So did she just get her a sleepy and then drape her on the handrail and let her fall on her own?
So it's funny that you mention that because, hang on, I'll send you the picture. I too thought the same thing until I looked up the actual photos, and you'll see that the handrail itself that you rest your hand on it stayed intact. The part that came out was at the bottom. Do you see it? Right.
How the hell does that happen?
So that's where I got lost in the details because I too was like, how the heck does this happen? And a month after all of this, the police receive an anonymous tip to investigate further into Shirley Newman's fall. Along with that tip to police, it was kindly pointed out that Pam Hupp was the last person to see Shirley alive, and that she told staff not to expect her mother for dinner or breakfast. And Pam was videotaped during her interview over Russ saying she didn't need to kill Betsy for the life insurance because her mom was already dying and she was going to stand to collect $500,000.
Well, she just needed to prop her up on that rickety handrail.
Well, she didn't even prop her up because the handrail's not broken up there.
Well, she fell some way. I don't know. She forgot how to stand on a patio balcony thing.
Police never spoke with Pam about her mother's fall. They did speak with Pam's brother and a housekeeper who did confirm that Shirley was a fall risk. And it was concluded that Shirley magically drugged herself and then fell from the bottom underside of her balcony. And I normally try to respect the work the police do, but then there's times like everything I mention in this case in general.
It's a head scratcher?
It's a freaking head scratcher, and they're lazy as hell. And now they decided to look into the accidental fall and death of Shirley.
Mm-hmm.
So the police tried a subpoena for the location of Pam's cell phone at the time of her mother's death. They were unsuccessful because it had been several years since Shirley had died. Where was this attempt when Shirley magically fell? How did they... it didn't make sense that they ruled it an accident. It just doesn't make sense. The detective also attempted to have the balcony railing tested at the Missouri University of Science and Technology, but the Lake Park Independent Senior Living Facility refused to provide the railing for testing, which I didn't know you could do that. I guess they couldn't get a subpoena because it had been so long, and now they were just asking them out of the good graces of their hearts, can you please give us the railing? And they were like, no, fuck off. You had your chance to investigate. But then that TV reporter I told you about, Chris, his name is Chris Hayes. He's a Fox Files news investigator. He interviewed a retired homicide detective who suggested that the railing appeared to have been kicked out. And I watched that interview, and it was super interesting. The way the railing was bent and missing from Shirley's apartment balcony, you can't really comprehend without seeing the pictures. So to describe it, I already sent you the picture of the rail. The top handrail is intact, and the vertical bars are bent and missing.
Yeah, from the bottom.
Yeah, from the bottom. And when I saw that, I was like,
Makes sense for it to be a foot.
Right. Shirley is 218 pounds. She's 77 years old. She's got arthritis and can't get around without the use of an electric walker. How's she going to get enough force to break those bars free? And that's just what Chris Hayes and the detectives set out to determine. They put a team together and they recorded all these tests, which I did watch and I found super interesting.
Did they try full speed ahead with the electric walker?
So they used 218 pounds of hard weight connected to a pendulum to try to duplicate the damage done to the railing. After several attempts and scenarios of Shirley falling, because keep in mind, she also landed on her back. So they tried with her falling butt first into the railing. That required the 218-pound weights from being about 5 inches away, resulting in 117 pounds of force. and there was zero damage done to the railing. They tested the theory of if Shirley was falling face first, because also keep in mind, she had head injuries, but she didn't land on her head. They went with the whole theory of her tripping over the threshold going outside and having a little bit of momentum. The unlikely theory of if this frail woman who needed assistance from an electric walker could get a running start at the rail and go head first, yeah, she would get the frontal head injuries, but she would have landed on her stomach and not flat on her back. But they still tested the theory, and it was 288 pounds of pressure. That bent the bottom rail slightly, like the bottom horizontal rail, but none of the vertical rails. Everything still stood strong.
Well, maybe that part was a weak weld, so it didn't take 200 pounds of pressure.
Well, because you can see in the picture that it's not even a weld. They're set into it, and then the team decided to try the railing with 500 pounds of force, and they drew the weight back 36 inches and released it, and it still stood strong, even though at this point it's been rammed repeatedly and is now slightly damaged. But even with 500 pounds of force against a slightly damaged railing, it still stood strong. So Chris and his team were like, okay, so now we just need to see what it takes to break this thing. They pulled it back 65 inches, which was as far back as it could go, and it gained 9 miles per hour for momentum. And at that point, yes, the railings broke. Basically, if you're an NFL linebacker and gain the momentum, you could break the bars like these were broken if you ran at them. So they were like, so how did this even happen? An individual kick was 208 pounds of pressure. And this is where we get into the whole physics part of life of the weight spread across several bars. It distributes the amount of force, right? So each bar is not taking the brunt. But if you're individually kicking each bar, you could bend that one vertical bar and it bends out from the top and the bottom and thus results in a bent bar, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they tried. And sure enough, they were able to duplicate the balcony she fell off of, meaning that the railings that were missing were kicked out.
Or kicked.
They do a whole thing, right? And Chris Hayes also points out that Pam is the last one to have seen not only Betsy alive and she ended up dead, but now she's
But her mother.
her mother as well.
And then it's also a little weird that she mentioned she'd be real extra sleepy.
Yeah.
Just a little too many of the Ambiens. Like 7 too many.
Well, then Chris receives an anonymous letter saying, "Dear sirs, I think it's getting a little silly that you keep accusing someone of killing their parent when it's not true." I wonder who anonymously sent that. And that pesky Chris Hayes reporter also continued to dig into Pam and brought to light that in 2014, the money that Pam had Betsy help her raise for that other woman that was dying of cancer back in 2010 and 2011, Pam exaggerated the level of sickness that woman had. And yes, while she was dying and did in fact have cancer, she was not on her deathbed. That woman lived for another 2 years. And why do I mention this? Because Laura's family was unaware that people donated money to them in the first place because Pam kept it all. This reporter keeps pointing out all these things about Pam. Doesn't make her look too good, so Pam's not liking it at all. And in the meantime, Russ's attorney was still fighting hard for Russ. Someone within the corrupted prosecutor's office saw the injustices that were occurring and actually leaked 135 missing photos of the supposed undeveloped film to Russ's attorney from the crime scene.
Ooh.
And he won an appeal. He was going to be given a new trial. And the prosecutors went after Russ again. And this time, the defense pulls out the prosecutor's own film and they're like, hey, check these out. These say you guys are full of shit. And the prosecutors lost their star witness, Pamela, because Pam was not going to be called as a witness again because she had troubles of her own. Apparently, this piece of shit thought she was in the clear after Russ was convicted, and she reversed the trusts that she put in the girls' names, Betsy's girls' names.
Oh.
And she cashed them out. And she transferred all the money into her personal accounts. And Betsy's 2 daughters, they had a lawsuit going against Pam to try to retrieve their money.
What a piece of shit.
And since all of this chaos over the life insurance didn't make Pam look so good, or the death of her mother and the news reports and all that, and the defense was pointing the finger at Pam, The prosecutors were like, yeah, so we're just not going to put her up on the stand to testify. And also, during the second trial, Russ and his attorney took a gamble and they opted out of a jury trial. They wanted a judge to make a decision based off of facts and not emotion. In this case, with high risk comes high reward, and after 3 long years behind bars and 2 murder trials later, he was acquitted of the murder of his wife Betsy on November 7th, 2015, with the new judge saying the investigation into Betsy's death was rather disturbing and frankly raised more questions than answers.
He's lucky it was that quick.
Yeah. His attorney, his name was Joel Schwartz. He was amazing. He really fought for Russ. Russ and his attorney were not satisfied with just an acquittal. They filed a lawsuit against the county. Not willing to have the spotlight on her for the murder of Betsy and her mom, Pam set out to further frame Russ. On October 10th, 2016, she drove out to a not-so-great area pretending to be a producer for NBC. She spotted a woman named Carol McAfee, and Pam approached Carol and introduced herself as Kathy, and asked Carol to get in her car to go back with Pam, aka Kathy, to help film a scene for a Dateline special. Carol considered going with the woman until she was told she couldn't bring anything with her. No phone, no keys, no nothing. Carol said, "This sounds fishy, I'll pass," and then she called and reported it to the police. Pam continued stalking the streets in search for the perfect victim, and that's when she spotted 33-year-old Louise Royce Gumpenberger. Shortly after noon on August 16th, 2016, this conniving bitch lured Luis back to her house. She paid him $900 cash, and she gave him a note to put in his pocket that said, quote, "Kidnap Hupp. Get Russ's money from Hupp at her bank. Mango."
Maybe Hupp is a code word.
Anyway, so the note says, "Kidnap Hupp. Get Russ's money from Hupp at her bank. Kill Hupp, take Hupp back to house and get rid of her. Make it look like Russ's wife. Make sure knife sticking out of neck for reward of $10,000. So that was the note that was in this guy's pocket. Pam told Lewis that there were hidden cameras, so he didn't need to worry about that. He was to stand on this piece of carpet that she put down in the hallway while she pretended to be on the phone with 911, and she would have a fake gun. However, Pam called 911 for real to report a burglary in progress, and she told the 911 operator there was an intruder in her home as she pulled the trigger 5 times.
Oh.
I'm going to play you her 911 call.
911, what's your emergency? Hey, hello, there's someone broken in my house. Help! What's the address you're at? Help!
What did you what?
I'm getting in the car with you. No, get away. Address. Get out, get out, get out. Help! What's the address you're at? Help! Help! I think somebody breaking into No! Hello? Help! Help! Ma'am, can you hear me? Help!
That was wildly bad acting.
That was such-
I've seen middle school plays that were more believable than help, help.
Right.
It's almost like she didn't want to be loud enough for the neighbors to be like, come over.
Right. Well, or she's just a wildly bad actress. Who knows?
A D, all of the above.
Okay, so she, right after that, it cuts off because she pulls the trigger 5 times and shoots and kills Mr. Gumpenberger in the hallway of her home. Pam willingly goes to the police station to give her sob story and thinks she's going to get away with another murder. And again, frame Russ for hiring someone to kill her. Pam asked the detectives when she entered the interview room, would this be filmed because she's always appearing on the news with Chris Hayes, that reporter. And then she goes on a mini rant about how that pesky little reporter was attracting all kinds of negative attention to her as being responsible for the death of her murdered friend Betsy. Pam went on to tell the detectives that this feller jumped out of a car that was being driven by someone else, and he brandished a knife while she sat in her black SUV in her garage. And then he demanded she drive to the bank because Russ wanted his money. And Pam went on to further explain the hand that he was holding the knife in, how she hi-ya with a karate chop, and then she fled from her SUV into her house, where then she shot him in self-defense with her little handgun that she got from her nightstand, which, by the way, she did say she karate chopped his hand. I did not make that up. That is what she said.
Did she give the sound effects?
No, that was all me.
Was she trained in karate?
Sure wasn't.
I feel like... all right.
Yeah. And thankfully, these detectives did their job and didn't just take Pam at her word. They spoke to Luis's mother, who informed them that he was both physically and mentally handicapped after being in a severe car accident 11 years prior in 2005. That accident left him with both physical and mental disabilities. He couldn't even carry on a conversation or really move around. He can't run. He couldn't carry out any sort of diabolical assault or burglary, let alone a murder for hire plot.
Well, he didn't really carry it out.
Well, also Pam's cell phone record showed she was lurking in Luis's neighborhood yards from his front door and then drove back to her house. Pam was pinpointed, like I said, right at his front door less than an hour before the fatal shooting.
She's been sick a real long time.
They also spoke with that other lady, Carol McAfee, the woman about 5 days prior. She identified Pam as being the lady that offered her money to get in her car and go back, and said that Pam had offered Carol $1,000 to reenact a scene in that for a Dateline special. And then another person comes forward named Brent Charlton, and he informed police that he too lives in this area and was approached by an NBC producer named Kathy, who also offered him $1,000 to reenact a scene for a Dateline special. I guess Luis, because she needed gas money or whatever, he was only offered $900, and that was found in his pocket. But the other $100 that Pam decided to keep, the police had photographed the $100 that was back in Pam's back bedroom in her nightstand. It had sequential serial numbers to 4 of the $900 bills found on Luis. It's statistically impossible that they went to separate banks and then got the same.
Yeah.
And the knife that she hi-ya out of his hand, that knife that was found wedged between her console and her seat in the same manner she wedged knives in between her stove and her countertop, which, can I just say, it's never dawned on me to put my knives between my counter and my stove.
I was just sitting here going...
It seems disgusting, but I guess...
The things that I try to keep out of there are the crumbs.
Right. But Pam also, this one got me, because this shows how much it was premeditated, aside from her going and picking the feller up. The carpet that he died on was a swatch of carpet that she cut out of that house that she bought to flip.
So he conveniently died on a rug she could pull out?
That she could pull out so it wouldn't damage her rug. And last but not least, the note found in Luis's pocket
was handwritten.
Not only was it handwritten, but Pam had bought the paper from the Dollar Tree along with that kitchen knife that's only sold at the Dollar Tree. And it was all on the same receipt that the police found in Pam's possession.
She's been sick a real long time.
Yeah. On August 23rd, 2016, 1 week after she shot and killed Luis, Pam was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. After her interrogation, Pam was left sitting in the room alone. This cowardice psycho lady palms a ballpoint pen that was left on the table and then asked if she could use the restroom. While in the bathroom, Pam used the ballpoint pen to try to commit suicide. She stabbed herself uncountable number of times in both wrists and both sides of her neck. The doctors described Pam's self-inflicted neck wounds as Swiss cheese-looking injuries. I was like, ugh. But she survives, and the prosecutors described Pam's suicide attempt as consciousness of guilt. Bail was set for Pam at $2 million, and on January 31st, 2017, Pam pled not guilty. And by March 2017, the prosecutors stated they would be seeking the death penalty, and her trial would be set for June 2019. And while Pam was awaiting her trial, finally, in November of 2017, the chief medical examiner was like, you know what? Surely, Pam's mom, she might not have accidentally fallen And the chief medical examiner was like, you know what? We're going to go ahead and change Shirley's cause of death from accidental because many things have happened that involve the daughter due to all those other investigations. We're no longer willing to say that Shirley's death was accidental. So it was changed to undetermined. I didn't know that you could change the cause of death. How can they ever bring a case against her?
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around it. You had your opportunity 4 or 5 years ago. Why would you say it was accidental when it obviously was not?
Right.
And now all of a sudden you're going to be like, you know what? Because she's in trouble for other stuff, we're going to say that there's a chance
We're going to pile on.
Yeah, we're going to say there's a chance she did do this.
Now that we've been thinking about it.
Now in June, instead of contesting the murder charges against her, Pam decided to enter an Alford plea. And for those who aren't aware, that's where the defendant's allowed to plead guilty to criminal charges while simultaneously maintaining their innocence. And with her Alford plea, Pam would no longer be facing the death penalty. And in August of 2019, Pam was sentenced to life without parole. Pam called her husband from jail and told him she was only going to take this deal to protect her family because she didn't want them to have to endure that ugly trial. And let me just tell you now, Claire, that if I was innocent of any charges, my family, you guys are all going through whatever goddamn trial because I'm not.
I feel bad for him, though, in all this.
Yeah.
Although he should be glad he has an attorney that fought for him because he could have sat in jail for a very long time.
Oh, you're talking about Russ. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
my brain hole skipped back to him because she's not a lucky lady, but
Yeah.
She's a piece of shit.
And after entering her plea for murdering Luis, the new prosecuting attorney, Mike Wood, he announced he would be reopening. So the original prosecutor, her name was Leah Askey, and she's a piece of shit. And once she was voted out of her spot and this guy, Mike Wood, took over.
She's the one who was responsible for Russ being convicted?
Yes. And this feller, once he took over and straightened shit up in the state's office, he announced he'd be reopening the homicide investigation on Betsy. In September 2020, Mark, Pam's husband, he filed for divorce, describing their marriage as
irreconcilable differences.
No, irretrievably broken.
Oh, that's a thing?
I guess. And their divorce was finalized in March 2022. COVID slowed the investigation into Betsy's murder trial. But by July 12th, 2021, Pam was officially charged with first-degree murder of Betsy Faria. Due to the heinous and the depravity of the crime, the prosecution announced they will be seeking...
Which one?
For Betsy. That they'll be seeking the death penalty. And they said that Pam took advantage of Betsy being weakened from her chemo when she viciously stabbed her to death with 2 knives. Pam then removed Betsy's socks and used them to spread blood around the house to give the impression of a domestic violence situation. Then placed the socks back on Betsy's feet. Dipped Russ's slippers into Betsy's blood and placed those back in the closet. And then Pam also kept the $150,000 life insurance policy meant for Betsy's 2 daughters. And among other evidence and lies that Pam has told, she texted home to Betsy's phone at 7:20 to give the impression she dropped Betsy off and drove straight home, but the cell tower showed that she was still at Betsy's house. In July of 2021, Pam entered a plea of not guilty for the murder of her dying friend Betsy, if we can even call her a friend at this point. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for February 2022, and it was delayed indefinitely when Pam's public defender died of a heart attack. Death just surrounds this woman.
That's because she's the Grim Reaper.
She is. A whole lot of time and dates and court appearances go by, and the end result is that in January 2025, Pam's trial would be set for the murder of Betsy for August 3rd, 2026. So this woman still has to go to trial. When I saw that, I was like, what? I mean, I guess she's not going anywhere. She does have life for killing the other seller. Her trial is expected to take about a month. And due to her outrageously vile actions, the prosecutor also announced he will not be accepting another Alford plea. I'm pleased to report that the new prosecutor announced that he would be investigating the misconduct of the original murder investigation, and he suggested the actions of the original prosecutors and investigators showed gross negligence or calculated criminal behavior. He also stated by the time Russ had his second trial, the prosecutors were no longer acting to find justice. They were acting to protect.
No, they were just trying to keep Russ.
Well, they were protecting their own civil liability rather than actually seeking the truth. In 2017, the original judge on Russ's case, she was suspended for 6 months by the Missouri Supreme Court for ethical violations directly related to Russ's 2015 trial. And she still has not been reelected. And same with the prosecutor, Leah Askey. She's now practicing law, but for a private firm. And then Carol McAfee, the lady that Pam originally tried to pick up to kill and frame Russ, she's now married to Russ.
Oh, the fuck?
Yeah. I told you this case had so many twists and turns that we're going to leave you scratching your head going, what the heck? Yeah. So they met during all the chaos of Pam and I guess fell in love, bonded over tragedy, and they got married.
She's willing to kill her now.
And I'm sad to say that Russ has still not spoken to either one of his stepdaughters because they were manipulated by that first prosecutor into testifying about, and she manipulated him to the point of like,
they weren't on his side.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was questions of like, does he drink? Yes. Did you ever hear them fight? Yes.
How old were they though?
They were teenagers. I don't know because they were minors, but I would assume like between the ages of 14 and 17.
I feel like they'd be easy to mold.
Right. But he cut them off completely.
Especially if you tell teenagers that like, this guy did it. He killed your mom. We need you to testify because you heard all these things, and then painting a picture. And it's very possible. Have you ever seen like when people are wrongly convicted, but then you still have people who are unwilling to see any new evidence because they think the real criminal was actually let out?
Yeah. Well,
it could be a case of that.
I opted not to look further into the girls, but I did watch the miniseries that was done, and they made it appear as if the older daughter
is sorry.
No, she believes that he's guilty, and then the younger one was sorry. It doesn't matter. I hope they...
Well, it's easier to think that justice was wrong the second go around than that you took years from someone.
The girls also lost their battle with Pam during, remember I said that lawsuit that they had filed? Mm-hmm. They lost because since Betsy did not leave any specifications that could verify what her wishes were, like what were her intentions?
Yeah. There's no saying that that was actually for them.
The money was left to Pam, period. On paper, that's the way it looked, that's the way it was, and unfortunately the girls received nothing. And then the lawsuit Russ filed against the county, that was settled in March 2020 for $2 million. The county's insurance forked over the $2 million, and they said in no way did the county include an admission of any wrongdoing by the county or its officers. I was like, okay, sure, but that's all I've got. That's Pamela Hupp. She's a piece of shit.
She is a piece of shit. I hope she gets the death penalty, but realistically, she'll never be put to death.
Yeah. I gotta send you this picture of her, though, because I did laugh. So this is Betsy and Russ.
Not what I was picturing.
And then this one, Pam is obviously the one on the left. She looks like she has, like, heavy flow pads strapped to her neck. That's after she stabbed herself a whole bunch of times.
They don't even look well secured.
No. Can't tie them real tight. We
could. Be done with this.
We should.
I volunteer to help.
Right?
She looks like an asshole from her pictures.
She does.
What kind of sick son of a bitch murders somebody terminal?
I don't know. She needed the money. That's all she was worried about. Oh, here's her mom. And the Luis guy. But you figure she killed 3 people.
And they look like nice people.
Yeah.
Even her mom.
Yeah. You should watch the, I had to watch it on Peacock, I think, because I wasn't going to pay for each episode on Amazon. It was 6 episodes, and it's actually kind of funny the way they tell it.
All right. I find it wildly disturbing how easy it is to get convicted wrongly.
Yeah. Dude, they just had it out for Russ.
It just really sucks to sit in jail for years.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that.
I really dread editing this.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.